At the hotel, nobody understood the millionaire Chinese woman until the black maid spoke Chinese. Whispers and confused glances filled the luxurious lobby as staff scrambled to accommodate their distinguished guest. The unexpected connection between two women from vastly different worlds would change everything that day. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The marble floors of the Grand Regency Hotel gleamed beneath the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, reflecting light like pools of liquid silver. Mary Chen Smith stepped inside, her crimson silk dress swirling around her ankles, creating a stark contrast against the pristine white surroundings. The journey from her homeland had been exhausting, but the weight of her family's legacy pushed her forward with unwavering determination. Porters in crisp uniforms and receptionists with practiced smiles glanced her way, their initial expressions of welcome quickly morphing into confusion as she attempted to communicate. Her Mandarin words tumbled forth with urgency, but they might as well have been whispers in a hurricane for all the comprehension they received. Mary's voice grew increasingly desperate as she tried different phrases, different tones, hoping something would bridge the widening gap. "I don't understand," a bellhop muttered, shaking his head before turning away to assist other guests. The dismissal stung, sharp and unexpected. The hush that followed was so absolute it pressed against Mary's chest, making her breath shallow and her heart race. She stood alone in the bustling lobby, surrounded by people yet completely isolated. The elegant woman reached into her designer handbag, retrieving a gold-embroidered hong bao, a traditional red envelope containing money, meant as a gesture of goodwill and respect. "Please," she said, extending the envelope toward the nearest staff member, a young man whose name tag read Thomas. His eyes widened, darting nervously to his colleagues. "Ma'am, we don't accept. That's not how," he stammered, backing away as though she'd offered something illicit rather than a cultural courtesy. Mary's cheeks burned with humiliation as she realized her gesture had been completely misinterpreted, mistaken for a bribe rather than the traditional greeting it was meant to be. She carefully returned the envelope to her bag, her fingers trembling slightly with the effort of maintaining her composure. The Grand Regency had promised luxury, comfort, and exceptional service in its glossy brochure. The photographs had shown smiling staff and opulent surroundings, suggesting a place where every need would be anticipated and met with grace. Instead, Mary felt the sting of being both invisible and misunderstood. A foreigner whose wealth couldn't purchase basic dignity or understanding, she clutched her jade phoenix pendant, a family heirloom that had traveled across oceans and generations to be here. The cool stone against her fingertips centered her, reminding her why she had come. This momentary indignity would not deter her from her purpose. Mary straightened her shoulders and approached the front desk once more, determined to make herself understood. Rebecca Johnson's hands trembled as she stared at the computer screen, desperately trying to make sense of the reservation details. The front desk clerk tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, avoiding Mary Chen Smith's increasingly frustrated gaze. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I don't understand what you're saying," Rebecca said, her voice barely audible over the ambient piano music filling the Grand Regency's lobby. "Perhaps if you could write it down?" Mary sighed and reached into her designer handbag, pulling out her smartphone. She typed rapidly, then showed the screen to Rebecca. The translation app displayed her request, but something had gone wrong. The English text was garbled, making even less sense than her spoken Mandarin. "Is there anyone here who speaks Chinese?" Mary asked in Mandarin, her tone rising with urgency. She gestured to her luggage, then to the reservation system, trying to convey her situation through movement when words failed. A small crowd had gathered, other staff members exchanging glances, a few guests watching the uncomfortable scene unfold. One of the bellhops leaned toward his colleague. "Another one who thinks the world should cater to her," he whispered with a smirk. "Probably throwing money around back home, expecting the same treatment here." Sarah Davis paused her work, her hands gripping the handle of her cleaning cart. The housekeeper had been dusting the ornate mirror near the check-in area, practically invisible to the guests and staff alike in her grey uniform. She caught the bellhop's words and watched as Mary's shoulders tensed, the woman clearly understanding she was being mocked even if she couldn't translate the exact words. Sarah observed Mary's elegant posture, the way she maintained her dignity despite the frustration evident in her eyes. The jade pendant at her neck caught the light as she gestured, trying once more to explain her situation to the increasingly flustered Rebecca. "Maybe call the manager," Rebecca suggested to a nearby colleague, her anxiety mounting as the line behind Mary grew longer. Sarah's heart ached as she recognized the familiar pattern, the dismissal, the impatience, the subtle dehumanization that came with being modestist. She had experienced it herself too many times, though in different ways. The housekeeper watched as Mary's composed expression began to crack, revealing a glimpse of the exhaustion and isolation beneath. Making a decision, Sarah quietly set aside her cleaning supplies. No one noticed as she stepped away from her cart, the invisible woman making herself visible by choice. She moved toward the front desk, her steps deliberate, her mind already translating what she would say when she reached them. The evening light streamed through the stained glass windows, casting kaleidoscope patterns across the Grand Regency's grand staircase. Mary Chen Smith ascended the marble steps with measured grace, her shoulders tense from the day's frustration. The weight of being misunderstood hung heavily upon her, each failed attempt at communication another stone in her burden. As she reached the landing, the delicate gold chain around her neck suddenly gave way. Her jade phoenix pendant, a family heirloom passed down through 3 generations, slipped free and clattered against the polished marble with a sound that echoed through the cavernous space. The green stone spun in a small circle before coming to rest beneath an ornate banister. Sarah Davis, who had been methodically dusting a gilded mirror nearby, looked up at the distinctive sound. The housekeeper noticed the flash of emerald against white marble, and immediately set aside her cleaning supply. Without hesitation, she hurried over, her uniform rustling softly as she knelt to retrieve the pendant. "Shaoxingni de yu feng wang," Sarah said softly in perfect Mandarin, as she gently placed the pendant in Mary's palm. "Your phoenix is beautiful. It must be very precious to you." Mary froze, her fingers closing reflexively around the jade piece. For a moment, she simply stared at the housekeeper, disbelief etched across her features. After days of struggling to communicate, of being treated with polite indifference or barely concealed impatience, the sound of her native tongue felt like a cool drink after crossing a desert. "You speak Mandarin?" Mary asked, her voice barely above a whisper, still using her mother tongue. Sarah nodded, a small smile warming her face. "My mother taught me." She believed languages build bridges where walls might otherwise stand. The tension in Mary's shoulders eased slightly. She examined the pendant for damage, relief washing over her when she found none. "This belonged to my grandmother," she explained, her words flowing freely for the first time since her arrival. "She designed parts of this hotel, though few remember that now." "Perhaps I could help you," Sarah offered, glancing quickly around to ensure no other staff were watching their exchange. "If you need someone to translate," hope hiccupped in Mary's chest. A small flame, but the first she'd felt since arriving. She studied the housekeeper's face, searching for ulterior motives but finding only genuine kindness. "I would appreciate that more than you know," Mary replied, her voice steadying with newfound resolve. As they parted ways, both women sensed the significance of their chance encounter. What had begun with a fallen pendant had forged the first link in what might become a powerful alliance. 2 unlikely allies connected by language in a place where words had previously only built walls. The Grand Regency Hotel buzzed with afternoon activity, but Mary Chen Smith slipped away unnoticed. She followed her instincts down a quiet corridor where the plush carpet absorbed the sound of her footsteps. The hallway narrowed and darkened, leading her past storage rooms and maintenance closets, until she reached an unmarked door. Mary glanced over her shoulder before trying the handle. To her surprise, it turned easily. Inside, she discovered the hotel's archives, a forgotten room filled with filing cabinets, shelves of ledgers and trunks containing the building's history. Dust particles danced in the shaft of light from a small window as she moved deeper into the room. Her fingers traced along the spines of old books until she spotted a weathered trunk in the corner. Something about it called to her. Mary knelt beside it, her crimson silk dress pooling around her as she examined the lock. It was old and rusted, giving way with minimal effort. The trunk's hinges creaked as she lifted the lid. Inside lay stacks of papers, blueprints, and beneath them all, a battered leather ledger. Mary's heart quickened as she carefully extracted it, brushing away decades of dust. The pages were brittle with age, but the sketches inside remained clear, intricate drawings of a suite, labeled Phoenix Wing in both English and Chinese characters. "Grandmother," she whispered, recognizing the delicate brushstrokes. The drawings showed a stunning suite with jade panels, silk tapestries and traditional furnishings, a cultural sanctuary within the Western hotel. Mary's throat tightened as she turned each page. Here were her grandmother's notes in the margins, detailing the feng shui principles behind each element, the symbolism of the phoenix motifs, and plans for a tea ceremony space. This wasn't just any hotel suite, it was a masterpiece of cultural fusion, designed by her own family. Tears welled in her eyes as she traced the faded ink with trembling fingers. All these years she'd heard family stories about her grandmother's work, but seeing the evidence made it real. The Phoenix Wing wasn't a myth or exaggeration. It had existed, and somewhere in this hotel it might still exist. Mary carefully photographed each page with her smartphone, her mind racing. This ledger was proof of her family's connection to the Grand Regency, evidence of a legacy deliberately hidden away. Finding it was only the beginning. Reclaiming what rightfully belonged to her family would mean confronting the hotel management, uncovering why the suite had been erased from history, and fighting against those who would prefer the past. Remain buried. As she closed the trunk, Mary tucked the ledger into her handbag. The weight of it against her side felt like both a treasure and a burden, the key to her heritage and a challenge to the present. Whatever battles lay ahead, she was ready to face them. The morning sun streamed through the Grand Regency's windows as Mary Chen Smith sat in the hotel's business center, surrounded by stacks of paperwork. A crucial meeting with potential investors was scheduled for 2 o'clock, but the translator the hotel had promised was nowhere to be found. "I'm terribly sorry, Miss Smith," the concierge explained with a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Our regular service has experienced some unexpected delays. Perhaps we could reschedule your meeting." Mary shook her head firmly. Rescheduling wasn't an option. These investors wouldn't wait. She tried explaining this in Mandarin, but her words fell on uncomprehending ears. The concierge merely handed her more forms to fill out, each one seeming more irrelevant than the last. 3 hours before the meeting, Mary paced the marble lobby, her elegant posture betraying her growing anxiety. She watched hotel staff whisper among themselves, occasionally glancing in her direction before quickly looking away. The jade phoenix pendant felt heavy against her collarbone, a reminder of all that was at stake. Robert Smith, the hotel manager, approached with his clipboard clutched tightly to his chest. "Ms. Smith, I understand your frustration, but there's simply nothing more we can do on such short notice. Perhaps you could use a translation app on your smartphone." Mary's expression hardened. A translation app for a multi-million-dollar negotiation? It was insulting. From across the lobby, Sarah Davis watched the exchange while dusting a decorative table. She had been observing Mary's struggles since her arrival, feeling increasingly uncomfortable with the hotel's treatment of the guest. Making a decision that could jeopardize her position, Sarah set down her cleaning supplies and approached. "Miss Smith," she said quietly, "I could help, if you'd allow it." The manager turned, surprised to see the housekeeper addressing him directly. "Excuse me? I speak Mandarin," Sarah explained. "My mother taught me growing up. I could translate for Ms. Smith during her meeting." Robert's eyebrows shot up. "You? But you're just—" He stopped himself, reconsidering as he glanced at Mary's increasingly impatient expression. "Are you certain you're qualified for this kind of business discussion?" Sarah nodded confidently. "Yes, I studied international business before I started working here." Mary, understanding enough English to follow the conversation, looked at Sarah with newfound interest and gratitude. After a moment's hesitation, Robert reluctantly agreed. "Fine, but if anything goes wrong, I'll have no choice but to—" "It won't," Sarah interrupted, turning to Mary and greeting her in perfect Mandarin. For the first time since her arrival, Mary smiled genuinely, her shoulders relaxing as she responded in her native tongue. Together they walked toward the conference room, two women suddenly holding unexpected power in a system that had tried to silence them both. Mary Chen Smith returned to her suite after dinner, her mind still preoccupied with the Phoenix Wing documents. When she reached for the leather portfolio she'd carefully placed in the hotel safe, her blood ran cold. The portfolio containing her grandmother's deeds and historical records was missing. Heart racing, she immediately called the front desk. Within minutes, Robert Smith arrived, his expression tense as he inspected the safe. "I assure you, Miss Smith, we take security very seriously at the Grand Regency," he said, though his tone lacked conviction. They proceeded to the security office, where monitors displayed feeds from throughout the hotel. Mary watched anxiously as the security chief rewound the footage to earlier that afternoon. Just as the recording reached the time frame when she'd last accessed the safe, the screen flickered and dissolved into static. "Another technical malfunction," Robert explained too quickly. "Our system has been temperamental lately." Mary's eyes narrowed. "This is the third malfunction since I arrived," she said. "Quite convenient timing, wouldn't you say?" The manager shifted uncomfortably, avoiding her gaze. As they left the security office, Mary noticed Kevin Johnson, the night guard, standing near. The young man's eyes darted away when she looked at him, his fingers fidgeting with his uniform buttons. Earlier that day, she had seen Kevin lingering outside her door when she was returning from breakfast. He had been eyeing the manila envelope tucked under her arm with unusual interest. When questioned, he had mumbled something about routine security checks before hurrying away. Now, as their paths crossed again, guilt was written across his face. "Evening, Miss Smith," he muttered, unable to meet her eyes. "Mr. Johnson," Mary acknowledged coolly. "You seem troubled tonight." Kevin swallowed hard. "Just tired, ma'am. Long shift." As he walked away, Mary noticed something protruding from his pocket, the corner of what looked like a hotel document envelope. Her suspicions crystallized. The night guard clearly knew something about her missing papers. Back in her room, Mary paced the floor, the hotel suddenly feeling like a labyrinth of secrets, rather than a luxury accommodation. Who had ordered the theft? Was Kevin acting alone or under someone's direction? The static-filled security footage suggested a coordinated effort to conceal evidence. She reached for her smartphone, hesitated, then called Sarah Davis. If anyone could help navigate the hotel's hidden currents, it would be the housekeeper, who had already proven herself an unexpected ally in this increasingly hostile environment. "Sarah," Mary whispered when the call connected, "I need your help. Something's happened and I don't know who else to trust." The tension in the Grand Regency Hotel had been building for days. Staff whispered in corners, and suspicious glances followed Mary Chen Smith wherever she went. The elegant guest's determination to reclaim her family legacy had created ripples throughout the establishment, dividing loyalties and testing alliances. It was Sarah Davis who first noticed Heather Brown's strange behavior. The fellow housekeeper had been hovering near Mary's suite, her movements jittery and unfocused. When confronted later that afternoon, Heather's uniform pocket revealed a folded note covered in careful Mandarin characters, the very document Mary had been searching for all morning. "I needed the money," Heather confessed, tears streaming down her face as she stood in the staff break room. "The hospital bills keep coming and my insurance barely covers half." Her hands trembled as she explained how a mysterious man had offered her $300 for any documents belonging to the Chinese guest. When Sarah brought Mary to hear the confession, the staff expected outrage. Instead, Mary's expression softened as she listened to the housekeeper's story of mounting debt and a child needing specialized care. "I understand desperation," Mary said quietly. "It makes us do things we later regret." Rather than demanding Heather's dismissal, Mary reached into her purse and withdrew her checkbook. "This should cover your son's treatments for the next 6 months, she said, writing an amount that made Heather gasp. "Why would you help me after what I did?" Heather asked, stunned by the unexpected mercy. "Because kindness is rarer than money," Mary replied, "and far more valuable." The next morning, Heather arrived at Mary's door with not only the stolen note, but additional information. "The man who approached me works nights at the front desk," she whispered. "He has keys to the archive room." This revelation formed an unexpected bond between the women, Mary with her determination to reclaim her heritage, Sarah with her courage to speak up, and now Heather with her inside knowledge of the hotel's operation. As they shared tea in Mary's suite that evening, the three women from vastly different worlds found common ground in their defiance of the hotel's cold politics. Their unlikely alliance grew stronger, a quiet resistance against those who would dismiss them as merely a guest, and two housekeepers. "They underestimate us," Sarah observed, pouring another cup. Mary nodded, her jade pendant catching the light. That will be their mistake. Thunder rattled the windows of the Grand Regency Hotel as Mary Chen Smith fumbled with her keycard. A sense of foreboding washing over her. The door to her newly discovered suite swung open, revealing a nightmare. Lightning flashed, illuminating the devastation before her furniture upended, drawers emptied onto the floor, and shards of broken porcelain scattered across the carpet like fallen stars. "No, no, no," Mary whispered, her hands trembling as she rushed to a wooden trunk now lying on its side. The lock had been forced open, its contents strewn carelessly about. Most devastating of all were her grandmother's portraits, elegant paintings that had survived decades only to be tossed aside like garbage. Rain lashed against the windows as if mirroring her distress. Mary sank to her knees, gathering torn papers with shaking fingers. The ledger containing her grandmother's original sketches of the Phoenix Wing suite was missing. Without it, her claim to this piece of her family's legacy weakened considerably. Who would do this? And why now, when she was so close to proving her connection to this place? The sound of footsteps made Mary whirl around defensively, only to find Sarah Davis standing in the doorway, eyes wide with shock. "I heard about a disturbance up here," the housekeeper said, stepping carefully over broken glass. "Oh my God!" Sarah immediately knelt beside her, helping to gather scattered documents. "We need to document everything before touching too much," she advised, pulling out her smartphone. This wasn't random vandalism. Mary nodded, grateful for the woman's level-headed approach. "The jade pendant is still safe," she said, touching the phoenix at her throat. "But they took the ledger, the one thing that proves my grandmother designed this wing." Together they methodically photographed the destruction, creating a record of the attack. Sarah's determination never wavered, even as they discovered more missing items, keys to other rooms, letters written in faded ink, and a small box of family photographs. "Whoever did this knew exactly what they were looking for," Sarah observed, examining a jimmied lock. This wasn't just about stealing valuables. As they worked side by side, sorting through the wreckage of Mary's heritage, a silent pact formed between them. The hotel's polished veneer had cracked, revealing the ugliness beneath its luxury. "I won't let them erase her," Mary said finally, clutching a torn portrait of her grandmother. "Not again." Sarah placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll find who did this," she promised, "and we'll get it all back, every piece of your history." Outside, the storm began to subside, but inside the Phoenix Wing, a different kind of tempest was brewing, one fueled by determination and the unbreakable alliance of two women who refused to be silenced. Sarah Davis found herself navigating the narrow streets of Chinatown 7 days after the ransacking incident. The message that had brought her here was cryptic, a hastily scrawled note in both English and Mandarin, pinned to the Historical Society's community bulletin board. It simply read, "For those seeking truth about the Phoenix, tea brings clarity." The Golden Dragon Tea House was bustling with afternoon patrons. Sarah hesitated at the entrance, her housekeeper's uniform exchanged for casual clothes to avoid drawing attention. An elderly woman nodded toward a corner table as if expecting her. Following the unspoken direction, Sarah ordered jasmine tea and waited. "Sometimes what we seek finds us," the server murmured, sliding a napkin beneath Sarah's cup. Underneath lay a small key with a number. The bathroom locker revealed a weathered envelope containing a flash drive. Sarah's heart raced as she pocketed it, paying her bill before slipping out into the afternoon sunshine. She couldn't risk viewing its contents in public. Back in her modest apartment, Sarah connected the device to her laptop. The screen filled with documents, property deeds dating back 80 days, notarized confessions from former hotel employees, and most damning of all, audio recordings of board meetings where executives openly discussed suppressing Mary Chen Smith's family claim to the Phoenix Wing. "We can't acknowledge the Chen designs," a voice Sarah recognized as Robert Smith's declared in one recording. "The publicity would cost millions in reparations and damage control." Sarah's hands trembled as she scrolled through digitized photographs, showing Mary's grandmother alongside the original hotel architect. Handwritten notes in the margins confirmed her substantial contributions to the Phoenix Wing's design, contributions erased from official records. One document particularly stood out, A letter of termination citing creative differences dated just weeks before the grand opening, followed by promotional materials crediting only Western designers. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered, understanding the magnitude of what she'd discovered. This wasn't merely about a suite. It was about systematic erasure of a woman's legacy. She reached for her phone to call Mary but hesitated. The hotel likely monitored their communications. Instead, she copied the files to a second drive and deleted her digital footprints. Tomorrow she would find a secure way to share this with her ally. As Sarah stared at the evidence illuminating her screen, a mixture of hope and determination filled her chest. After decades of silence, the truth had finally surfaced. The question now was whether it would be enough to overcome decades of institutional resistance and restore what had been stolen from Mary's family. For the first time since this journey began, the balance of power had shifted. They finally had a fighting chance. With the evidence secured, Sarah Davis and Mary Chen Smith walked side by side down the Grand Regency's ornate corridor toward the executive boardroom. Each step on the plush carpet felt weighted with purpose. Sarah's housekeeping uniform had been replaced with a modest navy dress, borrowed but dignified, while Mary's crimson silk outfit made her look like a flame of determination against the hotel's muted palette. "They won't expect us to be prepared," Sarah whispered, clutching the flash drive in her palm. The small device contained everything: property deeds, notarized statements, and audio recordings that traced the Phoenix Wing's rightful ownership back to Mary's grandmother. Mary nodded, her jade phoenix pendant catching the light as it hung prominently around her neck. "Thank you," she replied in Mandarin, the words carrying the weight of weeks of struggle. The double doors to the boardroom loomed before them, polished oak with brass handles that reflected their distorted images. Sarah gave Mary's hand a quick squeeze before they entered. Inside, 12 executives sat around a massive table, their faces arranged in various expressions of impatience and skepticism. Robert Smith, positioned at the head, barely acknowledged their entrance with a curt nod. "Chen Smith believes she has evidence regarding her claim," the manager announced flatly. "We've agreed to hear it, though I remind the board this is merely a courtesy." Mary stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly as she connected the flash drive to the projection system. The screen illuminated with architectural drawings, the Phoenix Wing suite as it had been originally designed. "My grandmother created this space," Mary began, her accented English careful and deliberate. Sarah stood nearby, ready to translate nuances when needed. "Her signature is on every blueprint you see." Robert shifted uncomfortably as forensic analysis reports appeared next, confirming the age and authenticity of the documents. Several board members exchanged troubled glances. "The pendant," Mary continued, touching the jade phoenix at her throat, "matches exactly the motif in these original designs. It was the key she kept, the proof of her contribution erased from your hotel's history." One by one, the pieces of evidence mounted: photographs, letters, testimonials from elderly witnesses who remembered the Chinese architect, whose name had been deliberately omitted from hotel records. A woman at the far end of the table removed her glass. "If these documents are authentic," "They are," Say interjected firmly. "The Historical Society has verified everything." The room fell silent as the final piece appeared on screen. A recorded confession from a former hotel executive admitting to the systematic erasure of Mary's grandmother from the records. The vote that followed was tense, each raised hand seeming to move in slow motion. When the final tally was called, Mary's claim to the Phoenix Wing was recognized, a victory that felt both monumental and long overdue. Robert Smith's face flushed crimson as he slammed his palm against the polished oak table. "This is preposterous. A few old drawings and a piece of jewelry hardly constitute legitimate proof of ownership," he declared, his voice echoing through the boardroom. The hotel manager's eyes darted nervously between the 12 executives seated around him, seeking allies in his resistance. Mary Chen Smith remained composed, her fingers lightly touching the jade phoenix pendant at her throat. Through Sarah Davis's precise translation, her response carried both dignity and determination. "My grandmother's designs are unmistakable. The architectural details match exactly what was built, down to the hidden alcove behind the east wall panel." Sarah's voice remained steady as she interpreted, her housekeeping uniform standing in stark contrast to the executive's tailored suits. Yet her fluency commanded respect, transforming the dynamic in the room with each perfectly pronounced Mandarin phrase she translated into English. "The forensic analysis confirms the age of the documents," Mary continued through Sarah, "and the audio recordings clearly capture your predecessor admitting to the appropriation of my family's intellectual property." One of the board members, an older woman with steel-grey hair, leaned forward. "Mr. Smith, I've reviewed the evidence myself. The matching signatures on both the hotel's original blueprints and these newly discovered sketches are troubling." Robert loosened his tie, desperation creeping into his voice. "We cannot simply hand over control of our most prestigious suite based on century-old claims. Think of the precedent this sets." "We're not asking for the entire hotel," Sarah translated Mary's calm response. "Only recognition of what rightfully belongs to the Chen family, the Phoenix Wing, and its historical significance." The tension in the room was palpable as the board chair called for a vote. Those in favor of recognizing Ms. Chen Smith's claim to the Phoenix Wing's design and heritage. Hands rose slowly, first the woman with gray hair, then a younger executive near the window. One by one, reluctant palms lifted into the air, some avoiding eye contact, others nodding with newfound conviction. 8 in favor, 4 against. The chair announced. "The motion carries." Mary's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she exchanged a glance with Sarah. The housekeeper offered a small, affirming smile, a private acknowledgement of their unlikely alliance and what they had accomplished together. "The board will draft formal recognition of the Chen family's contribution to the Phoenix Wing," the chair continued, "and we will work with Ms. Chen Smith on appropriate commemoration." As they gathered their documents, Mary squeezed Sarah's hand briefly, a gesture that needed no translation. This victory, hard-won through perseverance and truth, marked not an ending but a beginning. News of Mary Chen Smith's victory rippled through the Grand Regency Hotel like an electric current. The board's recognition of her claim to the Phoenix Wing suite had shattered the carefully maintained facade of the establishment. In the employee break room, conversations halted whenever the topic arose, replaced by meaningful glances and hushed debates. "She deserved it," whispered one of the bellhops during lunch. "My grandmother faced the same treatment when she arrived here in the 60s. Not everyone shared this sentiment. Rebecca fidgeted nervously at the front desk, avoiding eye contact with Mary whenever she passed through the lobby. "This will change everything," she muttered to a colleague. "The hotel has traditions, protocol." Robert Smith called an emergency staff meeting, his face tight with controlled frustration. "The situation has been resolved legally," he announced, refusing to make eye contact with Sarah, who stood quietly in the back row. "We will accommodate the board's decision professionally, but this does not change our day-to-day operations." But it had. The housekeeping staff now greeted Mary with shy smiles instead of averted gazes. The kitchen began offering authentic Chinese tea service, small changes perhaps, but significant in their acknowledgement of a culture that had been previously ignored. Sarah found herself unexpectedly thrust into the spotlight. Co-workers who had barely noticed her for years now approached with questions about Mandarin phrases or cultural customs. "How did you learn to speak Chinese so well?" they'd ask, finally seeing beyond her uniform. "My mother taught me," Sarah would reply, pride warming her voice. She believed languages build bridges, not walls. During her break, Sarah began informal language sessions with interested staff members. They gathered in the corner of the cafeteria, practicing simple greetings and thank yous. Even Kevin, the night guard, joined occasionally, his earlier nervousness replaced by genuine curiosity. One afternoon, Amanda Garcia from the Historical Society visited, bringing documents about other culturally significant spaces within the hotel. "What you've done here matters," she told Sarah as they reviewed the paper. "It's about more than just one suite. It's about acknowledging erased histories." Sarah hadn't sought this role, but she embraced it with quiet determination. Each conversation became an opportunity to challenge assumptions, each shared phrase a small act of resistance against the prejudice that had nearly robbed Mary of her heritage. "You've started something important," Mary told her one evening, jade pendant gleaming at her throat. "People are listening now." Sarah smiled, thinking of her mother's lessons about courage and voice. The hotel's marble floors still gleamed with luxury, But beneath the surface, something fundamental had shifted, and she had helped make it happen. In the weeks following Mary's victory, the Phoenix Wing Suite began its transformation from a ransacked memory to a living testament of heritage. Heather Brown arrived each morning before her heavy shift, slipping into the suite with cleaning supplies and a heart full of determination. The housekeeper who had once pocketed Mary's note now spent hours on her knees, polishing tarnished silver frames that had been carelessly tossed aside during the break-in. "I didn't think you'd come back," Mary Chen Smith said one morning, finding Heather carefully rehanging a portrait of her grandmother. The elegant woman's voice was soft, without accusation. Heather's hands trembled slightly. "I need to make this right," she replied, adjusting the frame until it hung perfectly level. The medical bills that had driven her to desperation still sat unpaid on her kitchen table, but something more valuable than money had taken root in her conscience. Mary crossed the room and lifted a jade hairpin from a velvet-lined box. "My grandmother wore this on her wedding day," she explained, placing it gently in Heather's palm. "She believed that jade carries the energy of its handler. That's why I couldn't bear to lose my pendant." The housekeeper marveled at the smooth stone, understanding now what had been at stake. "I never stopped to think about what these things meant to you," she admitted. "When you forgave me instead of reporting me to Robert, it changed something in me." Each afternoon they worked side by side, Mary sharing stories as they restored order to chaos. She taught Heather how to properly arrange the ceremonial tea set, explaining the significance of each delicate piece. The working woman absorbed these lessons with growing reverence, recognizing that what she had once seen as mere objects were actually vessels of history. Other staff members noticed the unlikely friendship forming between the Chinese millionaire and the struggling housekeeper. Some whispered behind their hands, but others found themselves drawn to the suite, offering assistance during breaks or after shifts. What had begun as one woman's atonement was slowly becoming a collective healing. "You know," Heather said as she carefully placed fresh flowers beside a restored family photograph, "I never thought I'd be friends with someone like you." Mary smiled, understanding all the unspoken layers in that simple statement. "Second chances are rare treasures," she replied, her fingers brushing against her jade phoenix pendant. "Sometimes the most beautiful friendships grow in the most unexpected places." Their alliance, forged in forgiveness and strengthened through shared purpose, bloomed like a quiet revolution in the hotel's shadowed halls, a testament to the transformative power of empathy when given room to grow. After her shift at the Grand Regency Hotel, Sarah Davis returned to the modest apartment she shared with her mother. The small living room, filled with the aroma of jasmine tea, had become their sanctuary for evening conversations that stretched long into the night. "You reminded me of myself today," her mother said, pouring tea into delicate porcelain cups she had brought from Beijing 30 years ago. "Standing up for what's right, even when it costs you something." Sarah wrapped her hands around the warm cup, remembering how she had defended Mary Chen Smith earlier that day. "I never understood why you insisted I learn Mandarin when I was little. All the other kids were taking Spanish or French." Her mother smiled, the lines around her eyes deepening. "In Beijing, I was a translator for an international company. I believed words could build bridges between worlds." She paused, her eyes distant with memory. "When I came to America, those bridges disappeared. I was suddenly voiceless." As the evening shadows lengthened across their living room, her mother revealed stories Sarah had never heard, of falling in love with an American businessman, of leaving her prestigious position to follow him to a country where her credentials meant nothing, of scrubbing hotel floors while holding a master's degree in linguistics. "After your father left, I promised myself you would have what I lost," she said, her voice steady despite the pain Sarah could see in her eyes. "The ability to move between worlds." Sarah thought about Mary's determined face, about the jade phoenix pendant, about the whispered Mandarin that had created an instant connection between them. "I never realized what a gift you gave me," she whispered. Her mother reached across the table, her work-worn hands covering Sarah's. "Your language skills aren't just about words. They're about seeing people when others look past them." These conversations continued night after night. Sarah learned how her mother had once translated for diplomats, how she had dreamed of working for the United Nations before love redirected her path. Each story filled in pieces of a puzzle Sarah hadn't known she was solving, the origins of her own identity. One evening, as they looked through old photographs, Sarah made a decision. What's happening at the hotel? It's bigger than just Mary's claim. It's about whose stories get told, whose histories matter. Her mother nodded, understanding immediately. Then you must be the bridge. Sarah felt a new certainty settle in her chest. Her ability to connect cultures wasn't just a skill on a resume, it was her inheritance, her responsibility, her calling. In helping Mary reclaim her family's legacy, Sarah was also reclaiming her own. Not everyone at the Grand Regency Hotel celebrated Mary's progress. Michael Martin lurked in the shadows of the grand lobby, his press badge hidden beneath a tailored jacket, as he scribbled notes in a worn leather journal. The undercover journalist had spent weeks planting seeds of doubt among the staff, whispering that Mary Chan Smith was nothing more than a con artist with fabricated documents. "I've heard she bribed officials back in China," he murmured to a bellhop, sliding a $20 bill across the polished counter. "Those papers she's waving around? Forgeries? All of them." Michael's vendetta wasn't merely professional. His grandfather had once been a junior partner at the architectural firm that claimed credit for the hotel's design. The same firm that had erased Mary's grandmother from its records. If Mary's claim was validated, his family legacy would crumble alongside the hotel's carefully constructed history. He escalated his campaign, anonymously emailing board members with doctored photographs, suggesting Mary's jade pendant was a recent purchase, not a family heirloom. When that didn't work, he cornered one of Amanda's assistants from the Historical Society in the parking garage, his voice low and threatening as he suggested the young researcher reconsider his support of the Chinese woman's claim. But something unexpected happened as Michael observed Mary from afar. He watched her gentle patience with Heather, who had once betrayed her. He saw her quiet dignity when faced with Robert's dismissive attitude. Most of all, he witnessed her genuine emotion when touching the faded sketches of the Phoenix Wing, tears that no con artist could fake. During a particularly heated board meeting, Michael sat in the back row intending to gather more ammunition. Instead, he found himself transfixed as Mary spoke of her grandmother's erased contributions, her voice breaking slightly. "She died believing her work was forgotten," Mary said, clutching the jade phoenix. "I'm not here for money or fame. I'm here because no one should be erased from history." The words struck Michael like a physical blow. That night, he sat alone in his apartment, surrounded by his notes and fabrications, the weight of his deception pressing down on him. His grandfather had always claimed to be the creative genius behind certain design elements clearly drawn in Mary's grandmother's hand. The next morning, Michael approached Sarah in the staff corridor. "I need to speak with Mary," he said, his voice hoarse. "I've done something terrible." His subsequent confession provided the final piece of evidence Mary needed, testimony from within the very family that had benefited from her grandmother's erasure. For Michael, it was the beginning of a painful but necessary reckoning with his own family's history of privilege built on another's silence. Amanda Garcia arrived at the Grand Regency Hotel with a weathered leather portfolio tucked under her arm. The Historical Society director had been working late nights since Mary Chen Smith had first reached out, and the dark circles under her eyes betrayed her exhaustion. Yet there was an unmistakable energy in her step as she crossed the marble lobby. "I found something," Amanda whispered as she met Mary in the hotel's small reading room. She carefully spread out a collection of yellowed maps and faded correspondence across the polished oak table. These were buried in our archives, misfiled for decades. Mary's fingers trembled as she traced the delicate ink lines of what was unmistakably the Phoenix Wing's original floor plan. Her grandmother's distinctive handwriting filled the margins with notes about jade inlays and specific silk patterns for wall hangings. "This is her work," Mary said, voice catching. "This proves everything." The director nodded, adjusting her glasses as she pointed to a particular letter. "This correspondence between the hotel's original owner and your grandmother confirms her commission and subsequent payment. The hotel's claim that these designs were purchased outright is demonstrably false." For Amanda, this wasn't just another historical mystery. 20 years earlier, her own family had fought to reclaim artifacts taken from their ancestral home in Mexico during a period of political unrest. That battle had shaped her career path and fueled her passion for historical justice. "My grandfather used to say that history belongs to those who preserve it," Amanda explained, carefully organizing the documents into chronological order. Sometimes that preservation happens in unexpected places, by people who understand what's truly valuable. Sarah Davis slipped into the room during her break, still wearing her housekeeper's uniform. She examined the documents with careful attention, translating several notes written in flowing Mandarin characters. These specify the exact jade carving technique, Sarah explained. It's a regional style specific to your grandmother's province. Amanda's expertise brought legitimacy to what hotel management had dismissed as mere sentiment. Her methodical approach and professional standing made it increasingly difficult for Robert Smith to brush aside Mary's claims as the documentation mounted. "We'll need to file these with the court," Amanda said, carefully returning the documents to her portfolio. "With these maps and letters plus the pendant as physical evidence, we have a compelling case." As the three women stood together, their alliance represented something powerful: the intersection of professional authority, cultural knowledge, and personal determination. The Phoenix Wing's restoration was no longer just Mary's private quest, but a cause that touched on deeper issues of heritage and recognition. "Thank you," Mary said simply, her gratitude extending beyond words. Amanda smiled. "Some histories need to be reclaimed. I'm just glad to help yours find its way home." Kevin Johnson paced the empty corridor outside the security office, his footsteps echoing against the marble floors of the Grand Regency Hotel. For 3 nights he had barely slept, the weight of his knowledge pressing down on him like a physical burden. The night guard checked his watch, 3 in the morning, when secrets seemed to speak the loudest. He had seen things during his shifts that didn't add up. The malfunctioning cameras that mysteriously stopped recording whenever Mary Chen Smith's room was accessed. The hushed late-night meetings between Robert and 2 board members in the West Wing. The missing documents that had vanished during his watch. "I was just following orders," Kevin whispered to himself, the excuse sounding hollow even to his own ears. The security office door stood before him, containing evidence he had been instructed to delete. His hand trembled as he inserted his keycard. Inside, the blue glow of monitors illuminated his troubled face. Kevin sat heavily in his chair, remembering Sarah Davis's kindness when she brought him coffee during his lonely shifts. He thought of Mary's determined eyes as she searched for her family's legacy. These weren't just hotel guests and staff. They were people fighting for something that mattered. His smartphone vibrated with a text from Robert. "Confirm all footage from the 15th deleted." The night guard stared at the message, his conscience finally overcoming his fear. Instead of deleting the files, Kevin copied them to a flash drive. The footage clearly showed Robert himself entering Mary's room and removing papers from her belongings. There were recordings of conversations about maintaining the hotel's reputation and avoiding complications with the Chinese woman's claims. The next morning, Kevin approached Sarah as she pushed her cleaning cart down the hallway. "I need to speak with you and Smith," he said, his voice barely audible. "I know what happened to the missing documents." In Mary's suite, Kevin's confession poured out like water through broken dams. He described the systematic erasure of evidence, the tampering with security systems, and the network of employees paid to maintain silence. His hands shook as he handed over the flash drive. "They've been covering up the truth for years," he explained. "Not just about your grandmother's designs, but about other guests too. Anyone who threatened their version of history." Mary reached out and touched his arm gently. "Thank you for your courage," she said. The night guard nodded, relief washing over his face. "I couldn't be part of it anymore. Some things are more important than a paycheck." With Kevin's evidence, the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The truth about the Phoenix Wing and Mary's rightful claim stood revealed in the harsh light of undeniable proof, illuminating a path forward that could no longer be ignored. The Grand Regency Hotel's board of directors sat in stony silence as the final vote was tallied. Under the weight of mounting public scrutiny and the irrefutable evidence Mary Chen Smith had presented, they had no choice but to concede. The Phoenix Wing would be restored to its original glory, acknowledging the historical injustice that had kept it hidden for generations. Robert Smith cleared his throat uncomfortably. "The board has approved the full restoration budget," he announced, avoiding Mary's gaze. "Construction will begin next week." Mary simply nodded, her composure masking the whirlwind of emotions beneath. After weeks of fighting, her grandmother's legacy would finally be honored. The following days brought a flurry of activity to the long-neglected wing of the hotel. Architects pored over the original designs from the leather ledger, while cultural consultants ensured every detail honored the authentic Chinese aesthetic. Mary insisted that local craftspeople from Chinatown be hired for the specialized work, creating a bridge between communities. Sarah Davis visited during her breaks, watching as workers carefully restored jade panels that had been covered by ordinary drywall for decades. "Your grandmother would be proud," she told Mary, squeezing her hand. "I feel her here sometimes," Mary whispered, her fingers absently touching the phoenix pendant at her throat. "In the way the light hits these walls." Amanda Garcia from the Historical Society arrived with additional documents she'd uncovered. Photographs of Mary's grandmother standing proudly in this very space when it first opened. "We're preparing a permanent exhibition about her contributions," the director explained. "People should know this story." As red lacquer finishes were applied and gold leaf details restored, Mary experienced waves of conflicting emotions: relief that justice was finally being served, grief for her grandmother who never lived to see this vindication, and fierce pride in what they were accomplishing. Heather Brown, now fully committed to making amends, volunteered extra hours to help polish antique mirrors and arrange silk tapestries that would adorn the walls. Her dedication touched Mary deep. Even Kevin Johnson, the night guard, found ways to contribute, ensuring the security systems were properly installed to protect the precious artifacts that would soon be displayed. The Phoenix Wing was transforming from a forgotten secret into a cultural heritage site that would educate visitors about Chinese American history and artistry. Plaques were being prepared that would tell the full story, including the decades of erasure and the recent fight for recognition. As Mary watched workers carefully hang a restored portrait of her grandmother, she felt a sense of completion washing over her. The legacy that had been buried in silence would soon speak volumes to the world. The scent of oolong tea wafted through the air as guests gathered in the newly reopened Phoenix Wing. Sunlight streamed through the restored paper windows, casting golden patterns across the polished wooden floors. Red lacquer panels glowed beneath soft lantern light, while the delicate clink of porcelain teacups created a gentle symphony in the reverent hush. Mary Chen Smith stood at the center of it all, her jade phoenix pendant catching the light as she welcomed each guest with gracious nod. The artifact that had once slipped from her neck now rested proudly against her emerald kapau, a symbol of perseverance and heritage reclaimed. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears as she gazed around the room that her grandmother had designed decades ago. Sarah Davis moved quietly among the guests, no longer in her housekeeper uniform, but dressed in a simple blue dress that Amanda had helped her choose for the occasion. The transformation of her role from invisible staff to honored guest reflected the larger change that had swept through the Grand Regency. Several times she caught Mary's eye across the room, their shared glances speaking volumes about their improbable journey. Robert Smith stood awkwardly near the entrance, his presence a reluctant acknowledgement of the hotel's changed policies. The manager fidgeted with his tie, clearly uncomfortable yet unable to deny the beauty and significance of what had been accomplished. Nearby, Heather arranged fresh orchids with careful hands, her contribution to the celebration a small but meaningful step in her path to redemption. "My grandmother always said that tea connects people across time and space," Mary announced as she raised her cup. "Today we honor not just my family's legacy, but the power of understanding and compassion." Amanda Garcia from the Historical Society beamed as she unveiled a plaque detailing the suite's history, while Kevin Johnson, now head of security, ensured everything ran smoothly. Even Michael had come, standing quietly in the corner, his journalist notebook closed out of respect for the occasion. As the ceremony continued, guests moved through rooms that showcased artifacts and photographs chronicling the journey of Chinese immigrants who had helped build the hotel. The Phoenix Wing had become more than just a restored suite. It was now a bridge between cultures, a living museum where stories once silenced could finally be heard. Mary caught Sarah's eye and smiled, gratitude radiating between them. The hotel, once a place of isolation and misunderstanding, had transformed into a sanctuary of cultural exchange. Their shared triumph had demanded courage and trust, but in that moment, surrounded by allies who had become friends, the struggle seemed worth every painful step. The soft clink of porcelain echoed through the Phoenix Wing as Mary Chen Smith poured steaming oolong tea into delicate cups. Sunlight streamed through restored paper screens, casting a warm glow on the red lacquer panels that her grandmother had once designed with such care. The suite, hidden for decades behind prejudice and corporate greed, now stood as a testament to perseverance and truth. Mary caught Sarah Davis's eye across the room and smiled, a wordless exchange that carried the weight of their shared journey. The housekeeper, whose fluency in Mandarin had bridged worlds when no one else could or would help, nodded in return. Her simple uniform contrasted with the elegant surroundings, yet she moved through the space with the confidence of someone who had earned her place there. "To new beginnings," Mary said, raising her teacup in a toast that rippled through the gathered crowd. Hotel staff, community members, and even Robert Smith, still uncomfortable but present nonetheless, lifted their cups in response. Heather Brown stood nearby, her once desperate hands now steady, as she arranged pastries on jade green plates. The woman who had once betrayed Mary for medical bills had found redemption in helping restore the suite, polishing every silver frame and hanging every portrait with reverence. Kevin Johnson hovered near the entrance, his security uniform pressed for the occasion. The night guard's confession about the security glitches had been crucial in exposing the truth. He caught Mary's eye and gave a small nod, the weight of his former conflict visibly lifted from his shoulders. Amanda Garcia from the Historical Society was deep in conversation with several guests, pointing out architectural details that connected the suite to its cultural roots. Her expertise had transformed what could have been mere decoration into a living history lesson. Even Michael Martin, the journalist who had nearly derailed everything, stood quietly in a corner, his notebook closed for once, simply observing the triumph of the story he had tried to manipulate. "It's strange," Sarah whispered to Mary as they stood side by side, watching the mingling crowd. "How something as simple as language can build walls or bridges." Mary touched the jade phoenix pendant at her throat, its cool surface familiar under her fingertips. "My grandmother always said that understanding comes before change. You understood when no one else tried." The hotel, once cold and unwelcoming, hummed with conversation in multiple languages. Staff who had previously averted their eyes now engaged with genuine interest. What had begun as one woman's quest to reclaim her heritage had transformed into something larger, a space where cultures could meet without hierarchy, where listening became an act of respect. As guests filtered through the suite, admiring the restored treasures and reading the newly installed plaques, Mary and Sarah shared a moment of quiet acknowledgement. Their unlikely friendship had changed not just a hotel, but perhaps in some small way the world around them.